All right. Are we good?
Yeah, all set.
We're all set. All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Super excited to present ALTCS 101 for you. I'm John Michaels, the CEO of Stronghold Financial. This is my partner in crime, Katie Brenneman. She's the president of Stronghold Financial. And just a couple housekeeping items. I've got everybody on mute because we have quite a few people here attending, and we want to keep the background noise to a minimum. For questions and answers, if you could please enter your questions in the chat. Katie and I will open up to all questions at the end. If your question is kind of complex and you don't want to type it, that's fine. After we go through all of the typed out questions, just bring yourself up on camera and wave at us during the Q&A session at the end, and we'll unmute you and take questions that way. So if you can, type them in. If not, we'll bring you up on camera, and then you'll just have to be on camera on a Friday. No big deal. Cool. Let's get into, by the way, we are recording this session. Our intent is to share this content with everybody who registered but could not attend. So that's why we're recording the session. All right, so let's talk about what we're going to talk about. So for starters, we kind of want to start with the 3 ways to pay for long-term care. This is pretty important information and commonly misconstrued or misunderstood in the marketplace. So we just want to bullet it out for you. Then we're going to launch into one of those ways to pay for long-term care, which of course is what's ALTCS. Then we're going to tackle a married couple case study. Katie's going to take that because one of the most powerful parts of this presentation is to understand it in the context of actual real life people and how they utilized ALTCS in a way that was super beneficial for them. And I think you'll be surprised with the couple that we picked and what their situation was. It's probably not what you're thinking a typical ALTCS client would be, which can be pretty neat. So stay tuned for that. Then we're going to get into the meat of qualifying for ALTCS. There's really 2 major qualification pillars. There's medical requirements and financial requirements. You have to be eligible on both medical and financial to be ultimately eligible and approved for the program. So we're going to get into what makes someone medically eligible and what makes someone financially eligible so that you can understand who amongst the people that you work with and deal with might be a candidate for ALTCS kind of in the short term. Then we're going to bounce into another client case study of an unmarried individual. And the reason that we create a distinction between married and unmarried is the eligibility rules, especially on the financial side, can be different. For a married couple, there's kind of more going on there. So we'll tackle some of that, but we'll start with the married couple, we'll get into an unmarried couple, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. All right, so the 3 ways to pay for long-term care. One of them is, as you would expect, just pay for it out of pocket, right? Stroke a check. The second way is if you have long-term care insurance that you purchased, years ago when you were younger and healthy, that would be another way. You could file a claim with the insurance carrier and get whatever benefit is due you for the policy. And then really the third way is to get on the Medicaid program. Specifically, we want to make sure that you guys understand not Medicare, right? So Medicare is health insurance for retired people. Medicaid is like a tree that has 2 branches. One branch of it is health insurance for low-income people, and the other branch is long-term care for typically the elderly or somebody who's developmentally disabled. So what we're talking about here today, ALTCS, is the Arizona division of the Medicaid branch that deals with long-term care. So right out of the gate, I just want to let you know, most people who think they know about ALTCS and about Medicaid think that you have to spend down all of your assets in order to become financially eligible for the ALTCS program. And Katie and I are here to tell you, you absolutely do not have to do that. Your loved ones don't have to do that. The people that you know don't have to do that. The reason that we exist is we specialize in doing what we call asset preservation. Asset preservation is where we can protect all 100% of the assets for a healthy spouse in a marital situation. and anywhere from half to 2/3 of the assets in a single unmarried person's situation. It is 100% legal. We're using, federally approved strategies. The problem with these strategies are if you called ALTCS, they're not going to tell you that these strategies exist. Their job isn't to tell you how to get on the program. Their job is simply to approve or decline applications based on the merits of the application. So just like you can't call the IRS and ask them for tax advice or how to reduce your tax bill, you can't call the ALTCS office and expect them to give you any kind of meaningful guidance on how to navigate their program. All they're going to do is look at your application and say, approve, deny, next. They've got way too much caseload and way too much work to do to be expected to do any kind of consulting. So that's why firms like us exist, because we can help you prepare an application that is approvable before you ever apply. So the question is that not understanding how they're going to pay for long-term care, or thinking that it's going to be wildly expensive and they're going to have to pay out of pocket, which is that first method. How many people that you know or work with or work for delay getting the long-term care help that they need because they're afraid of having to stroke that check? I mean, it happens all the time where, we see couples where maybe the husband has Alzheimer's or just isn't doing very well physically and needs care. And the wife, who's, 84 years old and is starting to decline herself physically, is caring for him kind of, in an ineffective way because she doesn't have the help that she needs because she's afraid of, what the cost is going to be to pay for it. So we see it all the time, and it's amazing how much stress it can cause to the healthy spouse and to the family of the person who needs care, because they're ineffectually trying to provide the care themselves, when had they known about the ALTCS program and had they known that you don't have to spend down all of your assets and go broke to get on the program, they would have applied years ago. We just had a client, I think this week, who told Katie, I wish I'd known about this 3 years ago. I would have saved myself tons of time and tons of money and tons of stress.
Yeah, six figures. And unfortunately,
Yeah.
She attended a workshop a few years ago, hosted by another very well-known ALTCS planning firm that had given the guidance that you do have to spend down. So it's really challenging because even our counterparts in the industry are not always providing a consistent message about what's possible. So we really want to stress that regardless of what you've heard in the past, even from other ALTCS planning firms, potentially, maybe elder law attorneys, spending down is not necessary. Assets can be protected 99.9% of the time. It's just a matter of how that looks for that particular situation.
Yep. All right. So now that we know the 3 ways to pay, you can pay out of pocket, you can get long-term care insurance in the past, right? You're never going to get long-term care insurance in the moment when you need it. Just like you can't buy fire or flood insurance when your house is on fire or you're about to get hit by a hurricane. You got to get it in the past when you're a low risk. So the third way is going to be Medicaid. Here in Arizona, that's ALTCS. So what is ALTCS? So ALTCS stands for, it's an acronym. It stands for Arizona Long-Term Care System. It is a division, one of the 2 branches of ACCESS, which is an acronym for Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment System, which is the Arizona division of Medicaid. ACCESS receives their budget from 2 sources. One is federal funding, and the other is the Arizona Department of Health, which obviously gets their money from Arizona state income taxes. Where does the federal government get their money? Well, they either get it from taxes or they print it. But the point is that the budget that is created annually for ALTCS is all paid into by us, by you. We all pay into that budget with our income taxes year after year after year after year. And the reason why we bring this up is because we've had clients, especially the greatest generation, who don't want to be a burden on society, right? They don't want to be a ward of the state or whatever they would call it. Not realizing that they've paid into this program and it's a benefit designed for their care. So, we tell people, don't be ashamed and don't feel like, you're sucking off the society, right? You've paid into this. You've you're entitled to this, assuming you're eligible.
And I think a quick comparison, just to really drive that point home, is you've also paid into the Social Security Fund your entire working career. So could you imagine if you didn't know that Social Security even existed? You had to be lucky enough to stumble across a presentation like today to educate you on the fact that this program even exists and is available for you. And then could you imagine if you applied for Social Security and they said, you know what, John, you just did such a great job saving for retirement your whole life. You don't need this. You're not eligible for it. We're not going to give you access to this benefit. So if you think of it in terms of that, I think it kind of helps reframe the use of the Medicaid program and why you do absolutely have this benefit available to you and should utilize it should you find yourself in need for it.
Yeah, and how many people have said, "Oh, I don't want my Social Security benefit because I don't want to be a burden on society." Like
only never.
Like zero. Yeah, only never. Right. Cool. So the purpose of ALTCS, this is kind of our perspective on what ALTCS is about. It's not the dictionary definition, but it's basically to keep the elderly and the developmentally disabled out of the hospital. That chronic conditions would kind of cause them to need surgery or have a long hospital visit or have to go to rehab for an extended period of time. Chronic conditions can diminish the ability to perform what we call in the industry the adult activities of daily living. So if you're on this call, you probably already know about the ADLs. I'm just going to spend a couple of seconds. There's 7 of them in Arizona. All 50 states are given guidance by the federal government on what these ADLs should be, and all 50 states have the right to add or subtract as they see fit. In Arizona, mobility, transferring, bathing, dressing, eating, grooming, and toileting, where grooming is kind of the outlier that's kind of unique to Arizona. All of these have very strict definitions. You have to adhere to sort of the letter of the law in terms of the way that they're written. You'll notice that we don't have medication management as one of the activities of daily living. So you can have somebody who is completely non-functional, but on medication, they're completely functional, and they're not necessarily eligible for the ALTCS program just by virtue of the fact that they need somebody to help them manage their meds. It's sad, but that's just the way the program is written. And so these are the 7 ADLs that define how independent or how dependent somebody is. And ALTCS is built, as you're going to see here in a second, for somebody who requires a hands-on level of care, somebody who is dependent on others to be able to navigate these ADLs. So let's talk about the benefit of ALTCS. Like ultimately, what does it do for people? In other words, financially, what is it going to cover? So 2 ways to look at it. One is if you're in a care community, used to be called a group home or even an assisted living community, memory care. Point is, if you're moving out of your house and you're going to a community, big or small, that's one scenario. So first of all, the applicant, the individual who's going into the ALTCS program and going into the community, their income is going to come off the top first to pay for their share of costs. So you're expected to continue to still support yourself to the extent that you're financially able. You do get a little bit of a stipend of your own income. You can keep this year about $126 a month, which is called a personal needs allowance. So that comes kind of off the top. You can set that aside for socks and toothpaste. But the rest of your income, by and large, is expected to be used to go towards your share of costs. Now, for married couples, which we're going to get into again, a case study for a married couple a little bit later, the healthy spouse can claim a portion of their spouse's income if the healthy spouse earns less and their expense structure is such that they need the extra income to help them, meet their monthly expenses. So maybe not all of the income aside from the 126 will go towards share of costs, maybe some of it, but that's kind of a formula that we have to look at on a case-by-case basis. Once all of that calculation is done, right, you've got cost of care up here, income down here, there's a gap. ALTCS is going to cover that gap, right? And that can be thousands and thousands of dollars a month. It can be anywhere from a few $100s a month, all the way up to really there's no limit. It could be $20,000 a month, depending upon what the person's cost of care is. So a quick example, let's say a person's, if they were going to private pay, their share of costs would be about $5,700 a month for a relatively nice assisted living. Let's say their social security check is $1,500 and that's the only income they've got coming in. So 126 gets pulled out of the 1,500 for personal needs. That leaves $1,374 as their share of costs. That's going to go towards the $5,700 a month to pay for their share of costs. The out-of-pocket cost is then going to be reduced by $4,326 a month. So ALTCS is going to pay $4,326 month after month after month for a total of about $52,000 in annual benefit. Then that all gets adjusted going into the next year, right? The community is going to raise their prices. ALTCS is going to maybe adjust some of their stuff. But the good news is that ALTCS is always going to pay the gap between that person's income and their cost of care, regardless of how expensive their cost of care gets, assuming that that person still medically needs that cost of care. Obviously, if they miraculously improve, they might get kicked off the program altogether, but that's a different conversation for a different day.
Yeah, and one thing to just throw in there real quickly, because I know we have a lot of individuals on the call today or watching the recording afterwards that are from the industry. Maybe you own a residential home, maybe you work for an assisted living or memory care community. We all know on our end of things that ALTCS isn't really covering that exact gap of $4,326 a month. There's a pre-negotiated contracted rate that ALTCS is paying the long-term care service provider. This is from the applicant, the married couple, the family's perspective. The value that they're seeing provided by the ALTCS program is that gap between room and board payment and cost of care is eliminated.
Right. Okay, so that's a community situation. So this is the calculation of how much, wait a minute. Does that tie in?
In-home care.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So I did have a good segue there. Sorry about that. So the first scenario was a person's going to a community. This is a scenario where the person is receiving in-home care from an ALTCS contracted in-home care provider. So in general, ALTCS will cover up to 40 hours a week of in-home care. Now I realize there's a lot more hours in a week than 40. The idea here is that a spouse could go off to work and get their working hours covered by an ALTCS in-home care company, and then they come home and they provide the in-home care. The idea is that ideally somebody should be able to stay in their home and get the care that they need, but realistically, if you need more than 40 hours a week, you probably need to place that person into a community, is the way ALTCS looks at it. Average private pay rate, here in Maricopa County is about $33 an hour. So with that 40 hours a week, we're talking about $1,320 a week of in-home care costs covered, roughly $6,000 a month, somewhere in that range, almost $70,000 a year of in-home care costs covered by ALTCS. And what's interesting about in-home care is a family member can actually get certified to be the paid caregiver. So if you have a spouse or a child who's home caring for that loved one anyway, they can actually get paid, $15, $16 an hour, something along those lines, by the ALTCS program to provide care that they're providing anyway. So that's kind of an interesting, fun fact. You ready for a married client case study?
Yeah.
All right, let's jump in.
So we have a married couple that we've been working with, Sam and Yvonne, and Yvonne has dementia and needed to move into a memory care community. She'd been living at home with Sam prior to that, he was taking care of her for several years. Yvonne, her only income is her Social Security. It's about $700 a month total. Her monthly cost of care is $6,400 a month. And Sam and Yvonne, if you look at their total counted assets, so not counting the value of their home property, which they own in full, not counting the one vehicle that they have, they've got about $690,000 and some change of counted assets. So Sam was looking at the situation and he's, running the numbers, and he's noticed that the gap between Yvonne's income and her cost of care is substantial. It's $5,700 a month right now. which comes out to just under $70,000 a year right now. And he knows from talking with the memory care community that he should expect about a 5% per year increase in her cost of care. That's what we typically see with a lot of the communities that we work with. That means that 10 years from now, the gap between Yvonne's income and her cost of care is going to be over $100,000 at 5% inflation, over $111,000 10 years from now. And Yvonne is only 61 years old. She's physically healthy. We don't know how long she might be with us. And that's what absolutely terrifies Sam. He's 65 right now. So he's looking at the situation saying 10 years from now, I'm only going to be 75. I'm also physically healthy. Yvonne is physically healthy. What if I've blown through all of my assets at that point because of her cost of care increasing year after year? How am I going to afford to live? What if I need long-term care at some point also? So you might look at someone on the surface and think, well, they've got $700,000. They don't need the ALTCS program, or they could never qualify for the ALTCS program. But you can see that someone can have a meaningful amount of assets and it still isn't enough in their situation to make sure that the healthy spouse in particular is going to be okay for their lifetime. So the interesting thing is Sam had actually called ALTCS before calling our firm. And he told them a quick rundown of his situation. And this is exactly what they told him over the phone. He thought he would not be eligible for the program until he had spent down over $500,000. He told ALTCS, I've got $690,000. And they said, all right, well, your wife is going to be allowed to have $2,000 in her name. And you're going to be able to have what's called a community spouse resource allowance yourself. And you max out. The highest amount that is this year is $137,400. So between the two of you, you can have $139,400, and you've got to go spend everything else above and beyond that down until you're at that threshold, and then come back and apply for the program. But until then, it's a waste of your time. We're going to decline the application. So Sam left that conversation with ALTCS thinking, I've got to go spend down $555,000, and then I can come back and be a candidate for this program. Luckily, he knew someone at the memory care community who knew our firm and said, I think you need to have another conversation and find out what might be possible. So we were able to show Sam, instead of spending down the $555,000, can you click over to the next slide? Thanks. Is repositioning the $553,000 in his case into what's called a Medicaid compliant annuity. I want to stop here and put a disclaimer out there right off the bat. This is one of dozens of strategies that are available to qualify a married couple for the Medicaid program. This is not the strategy. This was the best one that made the most sense in their specific situation. There are situations where a Medicaid compliant annuity is not the best solution. So I just never want someone to think that this is always the answer and to be turned on or off to the prospect of qualifying for the Medicaid program as a result, because this could look like a very different plan for a different married couple for a number of reasons. So in Sam and Yvonne's case, the Medicaid compliant annuity was the best option in order for them to qualify for the Medicaid program without having to spend down over $500,000. We repositioned the $553,000 into the Medicaid compliant annuity. And the reason why this works from Medicaid's perspective is because something can only be considered an asset or an income at any given point in time. It cannot be both simultaneously. So the $553,000, when it was in in Sam's bank account, when it was in his investment accounts, when it was in his life insurance policies that have cash value, that is a counted asset in that situation. This particular type of annuity is a very niche type of annuity. You would only use it for the purposes of qualifying for Medicaid, never for any other reason. And it meets a number of criteria where Medicaid looks at it and says, this is now an income in our eyes rather than an asset. So we've taken the asset that ALTCS said to spend down, and we've effectively spent it down by converting it into an income. So ALTCS looks at this, and to them, it looks like Sam and Yvonne now have $139,400 in counted assets like they were told to have.
But wait a minute, why isn't the income putting them over the income limit?
The Medicaid compliant annuity is owned by Sam, and it's returning the funds to Sam and Sam only over a period of time.
So just to be clear, Yvonne is the one who's the applicant.
Right.
She's the one receiving care. So it's her income that in this case, ALTCS is going to look at to make sure her income is below the limit. But this annuity check that's coming every month for almost $13,000 isn't going to Yvonne. It's going only to Sam in Sam's name only.
Right.
His income in this case doesn't matter. So therefore it doesn't put Yvonne over the income limit because the money is going to Sam.
And as Sam's receiving this payment back every single month, he's putting it back into his bank accounts to build up liquidity, his investment accounts with his financial advisor for future growth. He's putting it back into the cash value of his life insurance policies. So as he gets it back, as long as he puts it into accounts in his name only, we're not disrupting Yvonne's financial eligibility. Sam could literally win the lottery the day after Yvonne's approved for ALTCS. And as long as he puts his $300 million of winnings in an account in his name only, Yvonne's ALTCS coverage is not disrupted, believe it or not. So in their situation, we always like to return the funds to someone like Sam as quickly as possible. At the same time, there are some things to be mindful of around that in order to make sure that they retain financial eligibility through the ALTCS application process. So in their case, we're able to return the funds to Sam over a period of about 45 months. It comes out to a little over $12,000 a month of a payment. And at the end of 45 months, Sam's got all $553,000 plus a little tiny bit of interest back in his possession. So he has the $500,000 plus, $550,000 back rather than having spent any of it down on Yvonne's cost of care. Do you want to, I feel like you talk through this.
Yeah.
nicely.
So, I mean, this just is a visual to help you understand, like, metaphorically. So which strategy makes the most sense? I mean, going back to the options, option one was you can spend the $553,000 down, Sam, and wait until it's gone and gone forever before, Yvonne can qualify for Medicaid, which is going to leave you with, 20% of the net worth that you've worked your whole lives to build. Or you can reposition, in this case, using the annuity. So the analogy that I use, the metaphor I use is, what makes more sense, the bucket or the boomerang, right? The spend down is take all your money, throw it in a bucket, open up the window, drive your car down the road and throw the money out the window, right? What's going to happen? The rest, your neighbor's going to come pick up all the money and it's going to be gone and gone forever. Versus take the money, the $553,000, tape it to a boomerang, open up the window, chuck the boomerang and watch all the money come back to you. 99,999 people out of 10,000, out of 100,000 are going to say the bucket, it makes no sense. And therefore the boomerang makes the most sense. It is certainly not a perfect solution, but it's far more perfect than spending your money down till it's gone and gone forever.
And I'm over here thinking, how odd is it that there's an image on the internet of a boomerang with money wrapped around?
I had to search for that one for
I've never really thought about
for
that.
a while. It took me a few
Yeah.
minutes. Good old Google.
So just to kind of summarize the outcome for Sam and Yvonne here, how did this change their lives? So going back again to the private pay rate of $6,400 a month right now, once approved for ALTCS, Yvonne's monthly out-of-pocket cost is only $574. From Sam and Yvonne's perspective, ALTCS is providing over $5,800 a month of value, which is almost $70,000 a year of value today. And again, if we extrapolate that out over the next decade and say 5% a year for inflation on the long-term care cost on an annual basis, that, believe it or not, is over $1 million in total value that the ALTCS program is providing Sam and Yvonne. And I got to tell you guys, like I'm going to do a video testimonial with Sam, because when you hear him talk about it, you can feel the relief, the peace of mind that this man now has, knowing he's going to be okay for the rest of his life too. And his wife's going to get the care that she needs and deserves for the rest of her life, because that was his primary concern. He was willing to spend it all on her. He was just terrified about where that would leave him.
Yeah, I mean, we saved him 80% of his net worth, which could have gone up in flames. Again, I just want to reiterate, in this case, the Medicaid compliant annuity strategy made the most sense of, all of the different strategies that we could possibly have brought to bear. Sam and Yvonne, unique case. Every single one of the clients that we work with are a unique case. And I don't know that we've necessarily executed the same exact strategy twice. I mean, certainly the numbers are different, but we take a good hard look at everybody's situation and implement the most appropriate and beneficial strategy. I mean, we're fiduciaries at the end of the day, which means we must do what is in our client's best interests, not what's in our best interest or someone else's best interest. So we always pick the strategy that is the most appropriate and is in their best interests to get them to their end goal. Okay. So I see that there's already some questions rolling into the chat. So thank you for that. Don't be shy about asking questions. I know that it's not ideal to have to wait till the end, but again, with as many people as we have, we appreciate you that you do wait till the end. Put them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. So now for what I consider to be the meat of the presentation, because there's just so much misinformation out there about how people qualify for ALTCS. So again, as I was saying earlier, there's two pillars of ALTCS eligibility. There's medical and there's financial, and you have to be eligible for both. It's not, I'm medically eligible, but I'm not financially eligible, or the other way around. You have to have both. So I just want to talk about at a high level the medical eligibility, because if you're not medically eligible, it is do not pass go. You're going to be declined. It doesn't matter where your situation is or what your situation is financially if you're not medically eligible. So the way the process works is an ALTCS applicant has to pass what's called a PASS, which is another acronym. It stands for pre-authorization screening. The PASS considers, first of all, to what extent does the applicant need assistance with the activities of daily living? It looks at the level to which and the frequency with which they might be incontinent. It looks at any major medical diagnoses that they have, for example, Alzheimer's and other things. It also looks at any dementia-related behaviors that they might be exhibiting that are a danger to themselves or the others in their immediate surrounding environment. Things like wandering, being self-injurious, being aggressive, either physically or verbally, being resistive, or being a disturbance, crying, screaming, taking your clothes off, throwing stuff, things like that. So the PASS kind of looks at all of that. And each one of these elements that a person is evaluated on has a weighting and a score. The bottom line is when all of that is weighted and scored and tallied up, the eligibility score needs to be 60 or above for somebody to be considered medically eligible. So again, just to be clear, below 60, not eligible, 60 or above, eligible. And then I would just add a little bit of nuance to that if somebody is close to 60 points, we consider them to be on the bubble, which means that oftentimes we can look at their care plan a little more closely. We can look at the medications that they're on a little more closely. There's things that we can say and do to kind of help the ALTCS program maybe look at this particular applicant with a little more favor. No guarantees, but we certainly can do a lot more with somebody who's at 55 points than we can with someone who's at 35 points. Now, the purpose of the PASS and medical eligibility is to ensure that the people who are getting on the ALTCS program require, and this is just an unfortunate term that's used by ALTCS, a nursing facility or a nursing home level of care. So back in the day when people needed a skilled level of care, hands-on, that was called a nursing facility level of care. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be in a skilled nursing facility. You can be in assisted living and still require a relatively high level of hands-on care. You can certainly be in memory care and require a hands-on level of memory care. It doesn't have to be a skilled nursing facility, but using their old vernacular that they haven't changed, they're looking for applicants who need a hands-on level of care. If you're an applicant who only needs maybe a supervisory level of care, that's not going to be good enough unless they have enough going on with major medical diagnoses and in behaviors and other things that would get them kind of over that 60-point threshold.
Yeah. And a couple of things just to add in that have come up lately. It can be confusing for professionals that serve, the senior long-term care community, and also for, our clients, patients, residents, because the communities have their own level of care scoring assessment as well. And it's apples and oranges with the ALTCS pass assessment, unfortunately. So if someone scores 138 points on the memory care community's, level of care assessment, that has absolutely nothing to do with what they're going to score on the ALTCS pass assessment. The way that ALTCS defines hands-on care is usually very different than how the communities will define hands-on care. And so sometimes from a community's perspective or a home care agency's perspective, they say, yes, this person needs hands-on help. And ALTCS says, well, your definition doesn't actually meet our definition. And they would really fall more into the supervisory level of care from how we define it. So it's really important to get real clarity around, is this applicant realistically medically eligible for the program? Because quite frankly, it would be irresponsible to restructure assets, like in Sam and Yvonne's case, for example, if we didn't feel extremely confident that Yvonne was medically eligible for the ALTCS program.
Yeah, and just to add a little something to that, as a result, we have an eligibility department at Stronghold Financial, whereby we have an ex-retired ALTCS eligibility coordinator on staff full-time. And her job is to basically do pass assessments for us, for the client, to determine with our best estimate, will this person, should they take the actual pass the pass? How many times did I just say pass? But it's really, really powerful because first of all, no other that I'm aware of, no other ALTCS company like ours has that. And secondly, again, you don't want to start moving people's money around, as Katie was just alluding to, unless you know that they're going to be medically eligible. So our department is, knock wood, batting 1,000, and has never, I don't think, said that somebody was going to be eligible and then they were declined by ALTCS. They're always right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's just high level medical eligibility. Do you not have a video out on the internet somewhere that's all about medical eligibility if people want to dive in a little bit more on that?
I do. Yeah. Reach out if that's something that you'd like. We can send you over a link to a YouTube video or presentation that I gave earlier this year that gets into the ins and outs of medical eligibility in a lot more detail.
Yeah. So if you're in a role where this is important information for you and you need more than just one slide's worth of content, hit Katie up and she'll get you that link. It's a phenomenal presentation. Financial.
Okay, so like John mentioned, an individual needs to be found both medically and financially eligible for ALTCS in order to be approved for the program, not either or. And so in order to be found financially eligible for the program, an applicant needs to be at or below the monthly income limit, at or below the resource limit. Resource is what ALTCS calls assets. And they also need to have not transferred any wealth, loaned anyone money, taken their name off of property or accounts, given someone money, not receiving something in comparable value in exchange in the 5 years leading up to applying for the program. If any of you have heard of the term, the 5-year look back before, that's what is being referred to. When someone applies for the ALTCS program, ALTCS looks back 5 years prior to applying and tries to determine, did this person give away any of their assets or wealth to another person, in an effort to become financially eligible for the program that much sooner. If everyone could just give away all of their money to their kids without any repercussions, people would probably do that and the Medicaid budget would implode. So that's something that they're assessing as well. Now, an application can still be approved if someone has given away assets in the 5 years prior to applying. It's not that the application will be declined. It can be approved, but it'll be approved with a delay in ALTCS coverage starting. And that delay is going to correspond to exactly how much value was determined to have been given away in the 5 years prior to applying. The way the math works out is currently for every $8,030 that an applicant transferred away in the 5 years before applying for the program, it's a 1 month delay in coverage. That $8,030 is being used because that's the average cost of skilled nursing in Maricopa County this year. So that figure changes once or twice a year, usually is how frequently we see that figure update. And they'll break that down to a daily amount. So, for every $270 that someone's given away, it's a 1 day delay. So if someone's taken their name off of their home property and deeded it to their children, and the value of the property at the time that they did that was $300,000, well, divide $300,000 by 8,030, and you can see you've got a several year delay in ALTCS coverage starting. So the application could be approved today, October 7th of 2022, but coverage might not be starting until 2026 based off of what the decision notice will state. Whether someone is married or unmarried makes a huge difference in what financial eligibility looks like for them. So let's start with unmarried first, because that's more simplistic to look at. So an applicant's income, gross monthly income, cannot exceed $2,523 a month. Again, that's the figure for this year. That figure is going to go up for inflation next year because Social Security and sometimes pensions have a cost of living adjustment as well. So right now, that's the monthly income cap. And I want to reiterate, we're looking at gross income. So this is before anything's withheld for Medicare Part B premiums or taxes. The applicant needs to be at or below $2,000 in counted assets. So a primary residence is typically an exempt asset. One vehicle is an exempt asset. Prepaid funeral expenses can be exempt. They need to be treated a certain way in order to be exempt. So that's important to take into consideration. But pretty much anything else outside of what you see up there on the screen is going to be a counted asset. So money in the bank, money in CDs, brokerage accounts, retirement accounts, annuities with cash value, life insurance with cash value, multiple vehicles, vacation properties, vacant land, timeshares. The list goes on and on.
And we've seen it all.
ATVs, yeah, I mean, golf carts.
Trailers.
So
did you say trailers?
that too.
Yeah.
So at or below $2,000 in counted assets as an unmarried applicant. If an unmarried applicant has more than that gross monthly income of $2,523, it's really important to know that there is a solution. A lot of people, we hear it all the time, think I'm not a candidate for the ALTCS program because my income's too high. Okay, well, what if your income is $3,000 a month, but your cost of care is $6,000 a month and you have $0 in the bank? You still need the ALTCS program. So the workaround to this is something called an income-only trust. It's also known as a Miller trust. And this is a solution to the applicant being over that gross monthly income limit. I want to take a pause here and stress that a Miller trust, an income-only trust, is never used for resources, for assets. We hear it all the time. Oh, they have too many assets to qualify for ALTCS. They have $100,000. You guys must be using a Miller trust. Absolutely not. Resources, assets do never go into a Miller trust. If a Miller trust has assets put into it, ALTCS will decline it all day long. So this is only a solution for someone being over the monthly income limit. When an unmarried applicant has more than $2,000 in counted assets, There are, again, a number of strategies that can be implemented in order to achieve financial eligibility for that person without them having to spend everything down to $2,000. And again, no cookie cutter solutions here. It's really important that everybody's situation is assessed specific to their needs and their unique circumstances. So in certain situations, if someone has $10,000, we might recommend some kind of spend down. You know, maybe they're investing in hiring a firm like ours, and that's part of the $8,000 that needs to be spent down to get them to two. Maybe they need to put prepaid funeral plans in place, or maybe we're going to do a small gift to someone in the family of a few $1,000s to get them below the $2,000. Depending on their cost of care per month, we can make that work by gifting assets 5 years prior to applying for the program. And we can still get the coverage in effect without there being a gap between spending down and ALTCS coverage starting. So sometimes that is the best strategy. There's another strategy that we can implement. It's sometimes referred to as half a loaf. So if you hear that, that's a strategy, an asset protection strategy that's being referred to. And that's a strategy where we can typically gift somewhere between 50 to 75% of the assets to a loved one. We are purposely creating a delay in ALTCS coverage in that situation. But with the 25 to 50% of the assets that aren't gifted, we're able to utilize those to cover the cost of care, the gap between income and cost of care during the transfer penalty that's created, the delay in coverage that's created from making that gift to the loved one. There's a very specific formula that needs to be used to determine how much money can be gifted and what's that going to look like. But that's a very common strategy that's used as well. We've had situations where we've actually purchased multiple properties, titled them all inside of an LLC, rented them out, and we've now converted a counted asset to an income by using that approach. Again, it has to be done in a very specific way, a lot of nuances there to make sure that it's all treated properly by ALTCS. But that's something that's really creative for a very unique situation. There are times where we can use what's called a special treatment trust, a lot of requirements for that to be the appropriate solution for someone. Bottom line is there are a lot of options available, and you don't want to work with a firm that implements cookie cutter solutions for everyone across the board. Moving on to a married couple, if one member of a married couple is applying for the program, ALTCS has two different ways of looking at income eligibility for that person. So they'll always start out looking at the applicant themselves. And if the applicant themselves is at or below that $2,523 a month gross income, then the applicant's income eligible. We don't have to look at the spouse's income now to determine income eligibility. Applicant's good. If they're over $2,523 a month, then ALTCS is going to actually look at the combined marital income. And if we double $2,523 a month, we get $5,046. So if the total marital income, gross, before anything's withheld, does not exceed $5,046, then the applicant's income eligible. If it does exceed $5,046, then we go back to the applicant themselves needing a Miller trust in that situation in order to achieve income eligibility. Right. So there's always a way to become income eligible. It's just a matter of how do we need the Miller trust or not. In a married couple situation, again, the applicant needs to be at no more than $2,000 of counted assets in their name. The healthy spouse is referred to as the community spouse by ALTCS terms. And so they're always allowed what's called a community spouse resource allowance. How much of the combined marital assets does the healthy spouse at home get to keep without having to spend down? And they're going to total all the assets up and they're going to divide them in half. That figure will never be less than $27,480 this year. Again, these figures change every year for inflation. So worst case scenario, the community spouse gets $27,480. When we divide all the assets in half, if they exceed $137,400, that's the maximum figure. So if there's $30,000 total, divide that in half, we're at 15,000. ALTCS says healthy spouse gets 27,480. They're pretty close to financial eligibility. If they've got $700,000 like Sam and Yvonne, we divide that in half and we've got 350,000. That exceeds 137,400. That's the current maximum amount allowed. And that's why Sam just maxed out at that 137,400 figure. So it's a different amount of assets that the healthy spouse is allowed to maintain for every single person. It's different. We talked about same Miller Trust strategy if the applicant is over the income limit for a married couple as well. And again, we've got a number of different solutions that can be implemented for a married couple. We walked through the Medicaid compliant annuity strategy. The same LLC and property acquisition strategy could be utilized in certain situations. We have clients that we've been able to use a reverse mortgage to protect assets. In some cases, they've already had the reverse mortgage in place. In other cases, we've recommended that they work with a reverse mortgage specialist to implement one. So you can go either way on that. We've got a really cool strategy we can use in certain situations where we can actually title the home property in a revocable living trust, or if they already have it titled in a revocable living trust, we can leave it in that trust for the first part of the application process. And then we remove it, which actually spends down some of their assets. So if we can achieve the spend down that ALTCS gives us on paper by removing the house temporarily from the trust, then sometimes that alone is sufficient to achieve financial eligibility for a married couple. But bottom line, again, absolutely no cookie cutter approaches. It's really important. We've seen the Medicaid compliant annuity strategy recommended to a client before where their situation was very unique and it almost had like hidden fees is the easiest way to explain it, where it would have cost that married couple an additional $40,000 in like these hidden costs that the firm they met with previously didn't know or explain to them. I'm not sure what it was. We were able to show them this is not the best strategy for you. This other strategy makes a lot more sense. It's a better outcome and it's going to save you $40,000 in the process. So I want to walk through an unmarried client case study real quick so that you guys can get a sense of what's possible here with asset protection. So in this case, we have Judy. Judy has dementia. She lives in a memory care community. Her Social Security is her only income. It's about $2,500 a month. And her cost of care in the memory care community is $5,700 a month right now. So Judy's been in memory care for a few years now, spending down her assets. She was about to run out of money. Her daughter sold her home property that still existed. Judy's home property had $203,000 of cash come in from the proceeds of the sale. And she wanted to know, is it possible to protect some of this rather than spend it all down on her cost of care like we've been doing the last few years? And she knew that it was always important to Judy, her mom, to leave a legacy behind for her two children. And so her daughter was most concerned, of course, with mom needs to get the care that she needs for the rest of her life, no matter what. But if we could protect some of the assets in the process for my brother and I, that would be great as well. Judy is 75 years old right now and physically healthy. Again, the gap between her income and cost of care is currently $3,200 a month, which comes out to almost $40,000 a year. Again, this is going to increase by about 5% a year. So 10 years from now, if Judy's still with us, the gap between her income and cost of care is going to be over $60,000, meaning Judy will be out of money. The $203,000 will be spent down in less than 5 years. So as an unmarried person, ALTCS says, all right, Judy's got $203,000. She's allowed to have a $2,000 individual resource allowance. And that means that she needs to spend down $201,000 before she can apply for the program. In this situation, again, I want to say this is unique to this situation, and we would rarely ever go this route. And quite frankly, we used it in this purpose today because it's a more simplistic strategy to explain rather than getting into something really complex. And so just know that we've made this as simplistic for you as possible. This is, again, not the right way to go a lot of the time. In this situation, there were some moving parts that made it the right strategy for this particular client. What we did was we gifted the $201,000 spend down to Judy's children. And when we did that, divide the $201,000 by $8,030, that factor that I explained for the delay in coverage that's assessed if you gift money 5 years before applying for the program. We purposely created a 25-month delay in Judy's ALTCS coverage starting. So for the next 25 months, Judy is not on ALTCS for long-term care. That means that the gifted money, the 201 grand, needs to be used by her children to cover the gap between her income and cost of care at the memory care community. So for 25 months, covering the gap, that means that about 78,000 and some change total is going to be used. We're including inflation estimates in there. That means that at the end of the 25 months, there's about $122,000 of the gifted assets remaining, and Judy's ALTCS coverage has now started. So there's no more gap being covered between her income and cost of care. That means that we've protected about 60% of what ALTCS would have said to spend down for the family.
All right. Well, hopefully that case study made sense. Again, that was a really specific and specialized situation. In that case, creating an intentional penalty made the most sense. The whole point here is that every case is unique. Every case has got its own nuances, its own stuff. So we have to use the right strategy. And when it's done correctly, virtually anyone, we can qualify virtually anyone financially. Certainly we get into maybe the ethics or the morality of, somebody with $5 million wanting to get on the ALTCS program. We've actually been approached in a couple of situations to do that. And we declined that case because we just didn't feel good about that particular one. But the bottom line is, in most cases, no one is too rich for ALTCS. And we apply our ethics and morality on whether we would personally help somebody that's got a ton of money. But because there's a finite number of ALTCS beds out there. And if you've got somebody who's got $5 million where they can't afford to pay for their own care for a period of time, certainly they're taking up that bed from somebody who really might be able to use it. Again, we specifically do not use cookie cutter approaches. I would even go so far as to say we are the most creative by far of all of the ALTCS planning firms out there. If you talk to any of our clients, they'll tell you the same thing. The plan is always 100% bespoke to the individual client. One thing I would say is, if you think you're going to need long-term care, or your loved one or somebody you work with, the sooner you start that planning process, the more options you have. So we have a lot of people who come to us who are not medically eligible yet. They score some points, but they're not at that 60-point threshold yet. One of the best things, and one of, frankly, the most intelligent things that they can do, is engage us to do a long-term care plan. And I don't know any other firms out there that do what we do, that do a long-term care plan, but it basically helps the family prepare themselves financially for what the eventuality is going to be when they need to apply for ALTCS, whether it's 3 months down the road or 3 years down the road or more. So by now you probably figured out this whole world of ALTCS is complicated. We think that experts like us should be utilized, if not us, someone like us who is going to use the right strategy and really approach this with a fiduciary mindset. So anything to add, or if not, I'll take it to the Q&A.
Yeah, let's start the questions.
All right, cool. So,
and if you have a question that's more detailed and you don't want to type it out, just drop that in the chat. And that way we can ask you to unmute and ask your question.
Yeah. So Erica Martinez asked one before we got to the whole 5-year look back deal. So she said, how long or how many years does ALTCS look back for income and assets? So it's not for income. But for asset spend down, they look back, as you know, 60 months or 5 years. So we covered that. Bob said, do you have to have assets to enter the better? Not sure what that one means. Do you?
No, Bob, can you, I see you have a couple more questions below as well. Can you clarify for us in the chat what you meant by that first question? Do you have to have assets to enter the better?
Yes, please.
Wendy asked, how are you paid and how often are you paid? Great question, Wendy. So typically we're paid by the client. We've had, I can count on, one hand, maybe two, the number of times we've had the actual skilled nursing facility or assisted living home or community has actually opted to hire our firm to get it done quickly, because obviously from their perspective, the faster that the person is on the ALTCS program, if it's an existing resident and there's no payer at the moment, the sooner they're approved for the program, the sooner there's a payer. And it only takes them, a month or two to recoup that cost. Sometimes, depending on the cost of care at a skilled nursing facility, it's only a few days and they recover the cost of our fee. But I would say that the vast majority of the time, the client actually has the fee. If we're looking at asset protection, then obviously the assets are there. We do have a number of adult children that hire us on behalf of their parents if their parents are already financially eligible. I would just say, if you serve the senior long-term care community in some way, I always caution you, do not assume that the family is not interested in hiring a professional to get it done fast. Our average approval time is about 4 weeks right now. And compare that to the industry average. Other ALTCS planning firms will tell you 2 to 3 months for the same situations. If you call ALTCS, they'll tell you 4 to 6 months. We've seen people try to navigate the process themselves that are a year in and still not having success. So when adult children are thinking, I need someone to take this off my plate and I need to get it done yesterday, a lot of times they're willing to band together and make the investment in hiring a firm to get it done in short order. How often are we paid? We charge, if someone needs just the medical side of things done, we can kind of like siphon off some of our fees and just address certain pieces of the process. If someone is hiring us to implement the whole thing, it's really like a one-time fee. And then we do actually offer what we call Medicaid maintenance, which again, I only know of one other firm that does this as well. We'll actually remain on file as the authorized representative after someone's approved for the program. And we'll do all of the renewals with ALTCS on the financial and medical side. We'll check in with the family quarterly, make sure that they don't lose financial eligibility for any reason due to changes. And that's an optional program. And that's just going to renew on an annual basis until someone opts out.
Yeah, and by the way, we have a page on our website with our ALTCS fee schedule. So I just pasted a link to that page for anyone who might be interested in the specifics of what we charge. Just go ahead and pull that up, no problem. I don't know any other firms that actually publish their fee schedule, and we have no problem being transparent about that.
Yeah, and the other thing I like to put out there as well, we're not the least expensive ALTCS planning firm from just looking at the fee schedule perspective. So let's just talk about that right off the bat. There's a big difference between a firm's fee to work with them and the total cost of hiring them.
Like that firm that was going to recommend the annuity for $40,000 more. Right?
Yeah, I mean, that was a case where that firm had quoted an $8,000 fee to protect about $400,000 in assets total for a married couple. Our fee in that situation was a $10,000 fee. So on the surface, it looks like our fee is $2,000 more expensive. In all reality, our fee was over $40,000 less expensive. Also, with us getting an application approved in a situation like that, it was maybe about a 2-month approval. Other firms will quote usually about a 7-month process for a comparable situation. So if you look at the difference in what out-of-pocket long-term care costs are paid in those extra 5 months that it takes to get through the approval process, it becomes astronomically more expensive to hire another firm with a less expensive fee. So you really want to look at more than just that surface level fee. But again, we have no qualms, just transparently talking about what investment it is to hire our firm to engage in various pieces of the process.
Yeah. So just to revisit Bob's question, he said, if my mother has a mobile home and we're interested in starting ALTCS in-home care, do we have to spend down the value of her home? The answer is no. So the primary home is always an exempt asset unless you move the primary home into a living trust. So in that case, an exempt asset means you don't have to spend down the value. It's exempt from the asset calculation.
Yeah. Now, there are some caveats to that, Bob. Like there are just other things to take into consideration where I would want you to be very educated and informed on how things look if mom is approved for ALTCS in the home, if you sell the home later versus now, if asset protection for the value of the home property is important, for the family. Then there are definitely things there that we want to talk about in a lot more detail to make sure that we're trying to accomplish every single goal for you that you have. So is that possible? If so, we want to do that. So your question in a way is also a loaded question.
No offense. So Dana Melcher, do you handle acquisition of long-term care insurance? We absolutely do, although I would say, two parts to the question, or parts to the answer. We are a full service fiduciary financial advisory firm. So I have my Series 65 securities license. I'm a fiduciary wealth advisor. I also have my insurance license across a number of states, including Arizona. I also have my long-term care insurance license. I have never sold a pure, homogenous long-term care insurance policy. And the reason why is because the way that those products were structured back in the 80s and 90s have basically broken. They don't work anymore. The financial model for the insurance carriers themselves broke for a number of reasons that I won't get into here. And so they have been raising the premiums of these poor people that have been paying into those policies for years and years and years. What I do use to do long-term care risk coverage is I use different types of products, like something called hybrid life insurance or indexed universal, IUL, indexed universal life insurance. We can also use asset-based long-term care insurance. So there's other solutions that have come about more recently, like in the past 12, 15 years, that are way more well-suited to the problems of long-term care. And unlike auto insurance, you pay premiums your whole life. And if you never get into a car accident, you've sunk all that money. Pure long-term care insurance is like that too. If you never end up putting in a claim, you've paid all that money for long-term care insurance and it's wasted. The solutions that I specialize in, you can actually use those assets and you can draw from them using creating a tax-free income source. So if you end up not needing long-term care, at least that money isn't sunk. So no more on that, but.
Well, I would actually put a little bit more into that. One thing that's really important to do from our perspective is to make sure that if you're exploring those types of long-term care insurance solutions, that you're also working with someone who understands how to leverage the ALTCS program, because it's really challenging to plan ahead for how to pay for long-term care because no one has the crystal ball to know what's it going to cost. We have a lot of clients that are referred to us by skilled nursing facilities where their cost of care is $15,000, $20,000, sometimes $30,000 a month. So you might implement one of these long-term care insurance type solutions and plan for $10,000 a month. But if all of a sudden you're faced with some kind of event that's causing a $20,000 a month long-term care bill, $15,000 a month bill, and your coverage that you put in place is only covering 10 of it, again, you're back to, am I going to private pay the rest? Or do I want ALTCS to pay for some of this? And a lot of the solutions that are out there, they don't work well hand in hand with ALTCS. And so you run the risk that you implement this insurance coverage that down the road, you have to just blow up. It was a waste. You may as well have never had it. You may as well have had that money invested in the market working for you, because if we can protect the assets for you and get you on the ALTCS program, then what solution has the most value? So I would just say it's important to know that you're working with someone who understands how to leverage ALTCS as well. If we have to go the ALTCS route at some point down the road, how does this long-term care insurance solution factor into that? And we always want to make sure that it's going to be advantageous to the client to undo what they've done on the insurance side and leverage the ALTCS program if it's needed. Did I explain that?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
We have a couple more questions that have come in. So
Yeah.
can you tackle this one from Bob?
Bob, is it in our mother's interest to have assets over $2,000 to get into better memory care facilities versus having no assets and entering a welfare type nursing home? That's a great question, Bob. This is a common misconception. I totally get it though. People think that the communities that are contracted with ALTCS must be the worst of the worst, and it couldn't be further from the truth. There are some private pay only communities and homes out there that I wouldn't wish my worst enemy to live in. There are some ALTCS contracted homes and communities out there that I wouldn't wish my worst enemy to live in. So it's not a matter of are they private pay or are they contracted with ALTCS. It's really a matter of just finding the right fit. There are some absolutely beautiful, wonderful, high level of care homes and communities out there that are contracted for the ALTCS program. And something I would say
My mom lives at, I'll be honest. My mom lives at the Palazzo at 19th Avenue in Bethany Home. Palazzo takes ALTCS. She's not in assisted living yet. She's in independent living. One of the reasons we put her there was because if and when she needs assisted living, she doesn't have to move very far. I mean, she might have to move from one room to another, but within the same community, and she'll just roll right onto ALTCS. So
Yeah.
Palazzo is gorgeous. I mean, they just spent $6, $7, $8 million renovating that place, and I'm so glad that she's there. So
Yeah.
as a perfect example.
Yeah, and what I would say, Bob, is we should have a conversation in more detail about your mom's situation, because a lot of the communities or homes might have a private pay requirement before they'll allow an existing resident to roll to ALTCS. So for example, we just did a presentation last Thursday night for a community with a 2-year private pay requirement. And their cost of care at memory care is $6,200 a month. Let's just say hypothetically that ALTCS pays that community $4,000 a month for an ALTCS resident, and then your mom would pay her room and board payment on top of that. If there's a little bit of a gap between those, the ALTCS reimbursement rate and your mom's room and board payment and the $6,200 a month, that community will allow you to take the protected assets and private pay the difference in that gap. So as long as they get their full $6,200 a month, they don't care where it comes from. It can come from part ALTCS, part mom's income, and part gifted assets, protected assets. That's fine. And then after 2 years, mom's on ALTCS only, and you're not covering the gap anymore with those gifted assets. So in a situation like that, if your mom entered a community like that right off the bat, and ALTCS covered $4,000 a month of the bill for the next 2 years, that's $48,000 a year of value that ALTCS is bringing your family. $96,000 in total value that ALTCS is bringing your mom and your family. So there are some creative things we can do here if we all work together. And that's what we really stress is like, let's get on the same page and figure out how can we create a win-win for everyone.
Yep. I'm going to read this, but I want you to take it. It's from David Opsal. I have my primary residence up for sale with a realtor to purchase a smaller home with a lower payment. Okay. I'll spend all net proceeds on the new home, which is in a different state, so our daughter can help with my spouse's care. Am I okay doing this?
I'm spending all of the proceeds on the new home in a different state, so our daughter can help with your spouse's care. So you're moving to a different state where I guess I'm maybe not understanding all of the nuances there. And maybe if you're on still, David, can you unmute?
Here, I can unmute him.
Perfect.
I can ask to unmute him, but I can't unmute him.
If you know how to unmute David, go ahead and do that. Daughter lives in South Carolina.
Or Southern California.
So is this so that your daughter can help with your spouse's care or her spouse's care?
Yeah, David, tell you what, we're gonna move on to the next question, but maybe you can unmute and ask the question verbally on the call here.
If not, please give me a call later, David. My phone number is
I'll put it in the
yeah,
chat.
put it in the chat. Yeah. We can talk about that in more detail. Powder says, what happens if your loved one has dementia and needs a nursing home, but they don't have any money to even pay for the nursing home or even for this service to get approved for ALTCS? So a couple of things here. I would say, number one, John actually wrote a book called Medicaid Roadmap. Why don't you drop the
Coming up.
website for that? It's a $97 investment, so it still is not free of charge, but this is literally all of our best practices of how we get an application approved as quickly as we do. And if you email me directly, will you drop my email in the chat?
Yeah.
I have a little bit more detail than that I can share with you as well. Obviously, time is of the essence. I understand that. So as much as I wish that, we could work for free all of the time, it's unfortunately not the case. We are a for-profit business with employees and expenses of our own, but I want to help in any way that I can. So
awesome. Erica Martinez, thank you both for all you do as a senior placement agent. This is critical for supporting my clients, but also sharing your services with other industry partners. Thanks, Erica. It's nice to hear.
You're awesome.
You
we
are
love
awesome.
you.
Dana said, thank you for great information. So much to know. I'll be in touch. Dana, we look forward to it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Daughter lives in South Carolina and will live with us to help the spouse.
Perfect. So yeah, reach out to me, David, by phone, and let's have a quick conversation. I just want to make sure that everything is answered specific to your situation. There are some moving parts there that are important to take into consideration.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we are 20 minutes past the hour. The presentation took an hour, but all the Q&A. Thank you so much, everybody, for asking questions. That was awesome. We really enjoyed presenting to you today. I know Katie did too, right? Yeah.
Nice.
So we will make this recording available, and we wish everyone a wonderful and happy Friday and weekend.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Bye.